Most people know me as the voiceover guy, the radio guy, the marketing guy, the guy who has probably sold you things that you didn't want to buy, that you paid for with money you didn't have. And maybe you never even wanted it. And I apologize for that. If you have an unused ab roller in your closet, you can blame it on me. If your credit card balance is a little too high, you could blame that on me. I prefer you'd blame it on my grandmother, though. She started the whole thing. My grandmother, whose name, there's going to be a quiz on this, her name was Karen Gunhild Elisabeth Schellberg. And I called her Mama because that seemed to me to be a vaguely Scandinavian name. It means nothing, but in our family that meant this little short bundle of joy who came to this country in about 1915. She was 15 years old. She lived in Stockholm, and like most teenagers, she wanted to get out of the house. So she did, a couple thousand miles on a steamship with everything she owned in this big case, and she landed in the United States. But she had a cushy job all set for her. She was going to work for her uncle, and her uncle, I guess, ran a boarding house or something like that, and so she was going to be like the boarding house keeper. Pretty cushy job. He turned out to be a kind of a nasty, obnoxious, hard to deal with, probably like some of your customers, or children, maybe. Anyway, it was not a good situation. She looked for help, and it came in the form of Emil Hedquist, who was my grandfather. I never met him. He died a year before I was born, but he is a legend in our family as being even angrier than her uncle and more obnoxious than her uncle. He quenched that anger with alcohol, as most people did in those days, and unfortunately, there were times when my grandmother and my father had to carry Emil home from the tavern because he had passed out. This, as you might have guessed, is not the ideal relationship. And I lived with my mama for about 3 years, and she tried to teach me Swedish prayers and stories and songs, none of which I can remember because she wasn't a great storyteller. But she had two techniques that were pretty cool. Now, one of the techniques that she used was she would whisper stories to me. Even if there was nobody around, nobody in the house, she would say, "Come here." And she would whisper these stories. She'd say, "Your mom doesn't know this, but let me tell you the secret." And she would whisper to myself and my sister these stories. And it was like magic. Oh, we know stuff that our parents don't know. And she also had great cookies. But it was the stories that really attracted us to her. And the second thing she had is she made about half the stories about me. And she made up stuff. She said, "Oh, when you were a kid, you were so brave. You were only 5 years old, and all the other kids at the seashore, they were afraid when those big waves come in, but you just went right out there. You were so..." Well, I thought I was Superboy. Strange visitor from another planet with powers far beyond those of mortal men. Oh, the kids laughed at my cape in school, but didn't bother me. Anyway, so she did those two things. And so if you're telling a story to anybody, whether it's marketing or whether you're, whispering it to you because you happen to be a grandmother and there's nobody in the house, and what she wanted basically was not what you want, to increase the business and or help your organization. She just wanted love. She had 26 years of a pretty bad marriage, and so my sister and I were her hope for affection. And she won us over by telling stories about us. It was pretty magical, and I will remember her forever. So the deal is, if you remember those two things, everything else is just periphery. So thank you for coming. Good. Oh, yeah, thank you. Standing ovation. Anyway, every one of us has had dozens of teachers and mentors and coaches and pastors and professors. And how many do we remember out of all those? Maybe one or two, right? What qualities did they have? Does anybody remember a special teacher that they had? Yeah.
Well, I remember a math teacher in high school, and I was not very bad at math, but he had such clarity, such precision, and it was a step-by-step solution. And he laid out all the steps, and as long as you followed them, bingo.
Okay.
Great.
There you go. And you remembered this. Anybody else have a favorite teacher or coach? Yeah.
I remember my driver ed teacher. I just loved him, and he was a storyteller. So he said the only reason, the only excuse you should ever have for getting in an accident, the only one, is if a helicopter lands on you. That was it. I always remember that.
That just happened to me 2 days ago. So that's incredible. That is just, it was painful, but I'm okay now. So the thing is that many of the teachers we remember and those who really touched our lives were just good storytellers. And the thing is that stories, there's a certain magic about it. You know, we think in stories, we decide in stories, we dream in stories. So it comes naturally to us. And you know, it's only been in the last few thousand years that we started writing things down. So for years, all those things that you needed to know. This plant will kill you, this one will heal you. Here's where to hunt, this is what happens in this season. Here's where babies come from. Here's how tribes are formed. Here's what social life is. All that stuff was in stories because it was easily remembered. I like to say, because it's true, that facts, they're like Teflon. You can't hang on to them. But stories are sticky. And that's why they told stories, because one person could tell another person, and another person could pass it on. And for generations, that's how we learned. It's in our DNA. Now, the good news is that every one of us is already a storyteller. The sad news is we don't use it enough in our marketing. It's a hugely powerful tool. And we're going to talk about that over the next 4 weeks or so. And hopefully, this will be the beginning, and then each week from now on, except for the last one, which is on a Tuesday, just to trick you, it will be, we're going to go into more and more details. So no matter what kind of business you have or what kind of organization or how you want to use stories, you'll walk away with some tools that you'll be able to use. So with 10,000 years of storytelling experience, well, first of all, let me ask, how many people here are parents? Okay. How many people have had parents? That was a test question. Okay. Yeah, I was making sure. So you know what stories are like. You know, we know how to tell stories. Next week we're going to go over 7 ways to tell stories better. But this week we're going to talk a little bit about the power of stories and how you could use it. I do something with different companies and organizations called Story Interview, where I probe gently and lovingly in that same way that a good dentist would with stainless steel tools to find stories. And when I find those stories, I show organizations how to use them for education, for customer service, but a lot of times for marketing, because they're really valuable. And so many times I'll be talking to somebody from an organization and they'll tell me all the good stories, all the success stories. And you know which ones are sometimes the more powerful one? The disasters. What happened when it fell apart? What happened when you lost that $1 million contract? What happened? Those stories are good for 2 reasons. We learn some valuable things when we see a disaster face on. And secondly, if you use it in your marketing, it makes you more human. People don't buy from institutions, they buy from people. And if every commercial or ad or story that you tell your prospective clients is, oh, we did this and we're good at this and we're good at this, nobody believes it, you know, but our coffee's not so good. But everything else is really, or we're good at this, but don't talk to Jim in the front because all he wants to talk about is politics and religion, but he really knows hardware, so keep it to hardware, okay? Find some little, I call them chinks in the armor, because that will humanize you, your business, your organization, and it'll make it easier for your prospective donors or voters or buyers to see you as a human being and connect easier, works better. Most of us, I'm guessing, work either for ourselves here or we have a small business. Some of you may work for a large corporation or may have worked for large corporations, or you may have a large corporation that's your client. Corporations have a very special way of speaking to each other. Corporatese, we call it. And so just to give you an idea of what's that like and how we want to go in the opposite direction. Has everybody here seen that movie, what's it called? The Wizard of Oz? Yeah, or read the book, or maybe both. Now, if that story was being told by somebody from a corporate organization, they would probably say something like, an at-risk youth from a blended family in the Farm Belt is rendered unconscious during an extreme weather event. When she awakens, she undertakes a long, hazardous journey in which she is aided by an assortment of variously challenged adults. while also being pursued by a person of color, in this case, green. Upon reaching her destination, she learns that her journey was all a dream. She wakes up in her own bed with a newfound appreciation of the importance of family and community. Doesn't that touch your heart in a special way? And those are the facts. That's the story. But it doesn't do anything to you because there's no emotion. There's no story. It's not sticky. Asking somebody who hasn't seen the movie or read the book to repeat that would be like, girl, something, farm belt, I don't know. And it just wouldn't come up. So when we become professional communicators, sometimes we abandon storytelling. We use pie charts and we use PowerPoint, which is excellent for people who haven't had enough sleep. They get a chance to catch up on that. So my attempt is to improve your storytelling over the next 4 weeks. Can I make you great storytellers? There's a possibility if you pay attention and take notes, and I'm going to be sending you some information each week because we can't cover it all here, and that'll give you another form of information on what we're covering. And maybe someday I get to work with you or your company and consult with you in more depth, and we can really do some magic. So there are all kinds of stories. You can be telling stories that share your personal experience with the products or services you're promoting. And that has real power because it's your experience. You're not making it up. You're not reading from a brochure. You can tell stories that demonstrate how your existing customers have benefited. What has changed in their life so that you can talk to prospective customers and inspire them. You can, when you tell stories, you help your prospects basically get to know you and your business and maybe your products and services and what you can offer them. And that's powerful because that's better than what I will call traditional advertising, which often is a push advertising. Stories pull. They gather you and they pull you in. They lead you in. They seduce you. They lead you. They tease you. And that's why it works so well. You can tell stories that will help your prospects get to know and trust you. We get 5,000, minimum, 5,000 advertising messages to each of us every day. How many do you pay attention to? Probably only 4,800 of them. Maybe less. Because they roll off. And so many of them are facts. They're information. They're demands to buy. And it's like, we've had it up to here. Some of that stuff would have worked pretty well maybe in 1955, but nobody has changed ever since. Except for some of the real geniuses in direct marketing who really came to the fore in the 20s. And we'll be quoting one of them a little bit later. So when you give information, when you tell stories to your prospects, your possible clients, and there's information in that, and you tell it in a good story, so it's sticky, they remember it, they start to trust you more. Well, if all advertising is like this, and suddenly you tell a story that improves their lives, suddenly your trust level rises. And if the trust level rises, there's a much better chance that you're going to be able to convince somebody to do business with you who may not be right now. You can tell future stories. Now, future stories are the stories that you tell to somebody about, here's what your life is going to be like when you visit this website. Come to our store. Here's what the experience is going to be like. Here's what it's going to be like after you buy this. Here's what it's going to be like 3 months down the line when we're still following up with you and giving you support. It's like, wow. And so you tell a future story that people get involved in. It's a story about them. If you have a choice, and I'm jumping ahead here, you have a choice to tell stories about your company, and that can be good. About yourself, can be good. Your staff, your customer. There's the key. Tell stories about your customers or those about to become customers. If I tell you, if I take a picture of this room, turn the photo around, where's the first place you're going to look? That's right. Oh, it's a bad hair day again, I look okay. And the reason is because we do have this interest in ourselves, and we want to see how we're perceived by others. So you tell a story, as my mama did, about me. She told, I can't remember any of the other ones, but I remember the one she told about me, which were mostly lies, but God bless her, I believed them anyway. So future stories are like that. I've done a lot of different kinds of marketing throughout my varied career. In my experience, nothing gets better results than stories. And there are a number of reasons for that. Stories, they avoid confusion because they take things and they express them in simple terms that people are already familiar with. You take concepts that are new. If you have a new technology, you have a new way of transportation, you have a new way of energy or healthcare, whatever it is, you can't just put that sometimes in a 30-second commercial, but you can tell stories about the results that somebody has had. And suddenly it becomes clearer, becomes simpler, becomes easier. So you take something difficult to understand, you put it in story form, and if somebody said, is there, what would be the best inspiration for doing that? I would say Hemingway. Read Hemingway, who took the simplest words and told the most magical stories. There is a story, I'm not sure if it's true or not, about Ernest Hemingway. Somebody challenged him to write a story in 6 words. And some of you may have heard it, but a lot of people haven't. And I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a good example. And he said 6 words. For sale, baby shoes, never worn. Every one of us has created our own version of that story. And the fact that you did that, a good story will allow you to participate in some way. Any good art form, whether it's visual, whether it's dance or music or theater or performance or humor, any kind of performance that's really good will have the audience co-constructing. They'll participate. And good marketing does the same thing. You get the audience to participate in the creation of that. Robert Collier, in the 1920s, was a great direct marketer. And one of the things that he said is, you want to have an effective communication, enter into the conversation that your audience is already having. And that's good for especially writing press releases. What's on the minds of your customer? What's on the minds of your client? Create something that is going to be, you're hopping on a moving train, basically. And there's a technique I use called Googling for insights. And if you know who your customer is, and your customer could be the person who wants to donate or vote or whatever, and you say, well, we have to reach everybody. You know, we're selling pizza, and everybody buys pizza. Well, where's the bell curve? You take a look at the bell curve, and there are people who are 90 and there are people who are 6, and they all eat pizza, but where do you sell most of your pizza? You take a look at that hump in the bell curve and try to describe one person standing there right in the middle. Who is that person? He or she, what are they feeling? What's going on in their mind? Well, the way to find out is Google it. And let's say it's a single mom with 2 kids is my main target audience. So what do? You Google, what are moms with 2 kids feeling? That's the key word, feeling. And when you Google that, you will come up with about 1.3 million. Take a look at the first 5, and that will change every week or so. The first 5 will contain stories about what is going on in the minds of single moms with 2 kids. About how do you date when you've got 2 kids? Where do you go? What's safe? What do you do? With your kids when you go shopping? All these things. Those are the first 5. Take a look now. You have some real insight into touching that person's life. Now, as Robert Collier said, now you know what the conversation is. If you know what the conversation is, you can then take what you're selling, put it in the context of that, and lo and behold, you're on your way to marketing that is far better than anything your competitors are doing. Stories also increase the consumption of your sales message because they create curiosity. If you do a straight product presentation, here's what the product is for, here's what it does, here's how much it costs, it's on sale, buy it. Okay, oh, and here's where it's used. That's great. Well, when you tell a story, though, you turn the formula upside down. You're basically leading someone in, and probably starting by giving them information they didn't have. You're benefiting them. Has anybody read anything by Robert Cialdini? Robert Cialdini talks about reciprocity, and that is, if I'd like to sell you something, I will probably give you something that you'd be interested in. Information, stuff that you didn't know. Here's how, if you were buying a car, here are 6 things to watch for when you're buying a used car. Here, the 6 things to look for. Here are 14 things that your landscaper, that you don't need a landscaper for. and this information is coming from a landscaper. Basically, it's a trust-building information. You are giving somebody information without the overt asking for a sale. You've benefited them, and when you benefit somebody, you build trust, you build a relationship, and reciprocity is in effect. We can tell you, let me give you an example of something here. One of the things that we did to do kind of a version of this, especially involve the audience, was a project that I had for Dallas, Fort Worth area. D.R. Horton. D.R. Horton is a major builder. They will build out entire neighborhoods on spec and hopefully sell them. Well, they have a lot of major competitors in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so they came to us and they said, you know, the traditional advertising we're doing is not working. Well, it wasn't working for anybody. It was in the middle of a housing crisis. All their competitors were giving away, they were almost giving away, they were reducing the price of houses by $30,000, $40,000 just to make a sale. And still, they weren't moving houses. But everyone was doing it in a traditional way. You've seen the ads, you know, 3-bedroom, such and such pool, you know, whatever it happens, gated community, all the information. And so I said, okay, a way to break through that could be to tell stories and maybe make the stories interactive. Turns out that the prime mover for that buying decision, at least in that market, were women. Probably married women with 2 kids instead of single women with 2 kids. And so I started to create some commercials that I thought would target that group. Now, I was blessed from the client because they had a group of 12 women in the office, and they would tear apart, they would give me advice on my commercials. So I'd get them all together around the phone, and I would read them the commercial, and they would say, yeah, that's good. No, that was stupid. That's not going to work. That's a good one. And together, we created some commercials. Let me just play you one of them.
Tell me about the home of your dreams. Uh-huh. What about the kitchen? Oh, yeah. And the baths? What's your ideal family room like? Wow. So now what are you going to do? Dream some more? Or do something about it? Okay. Go to drhorton.com and get started. You can have your dream exactly the way you want it. D.R. Horton is America's builder. You'll call us your dream builder. drhorton.com.
And they used radio, they used social, they used print. We took the ideas and we expanded it over everything they were using. We didn't change their media buy at all, but we changed the words and we got them involved. What happened was they sold out 9 neighborhoods. They made $30.5 million. And they paid me $30.5. Okay. It was a good ROI. The thing is that people, and we also did a whole, because they also had a large Spanish market, and we also did a whole series of same commercials essentially, but they were done in Spanish. And they were even given an award by the Spanish community for reaching that community in a way that they wanted to be talked to, which is kind of interesting. I admit I had help from my focus group, God bless their hearts, but so 34, and that was profit, by the way, that wasn't gross. That was 30. And the reason they had such a high gross was they were selling these directly off the website. Everybody else was selling through brokers. So there's an additional 6% in boom, bottom line that just went to them. So they were happy. It worked. And it was just changing the words on what they were saying to people. Very simple. This is not, it wasn't a complex commercial, but it worked well. Stories bypass skepticism. And they neutralize sales resistance. When you're sitting down listening to a story, you're not sitting there with your guard up. You know, you're not there with the arms folded. You are kind of more open. And that's why some of the commercials that we do either have humor in them or they have something poignant. They could be scary. Whatever it is, they're stories. And that opens people up to hearing things because nobody wants to be taken advantage of. They don't want to look foolish. They don't make a bad purchase. They kind of fight you all the way. But when you talk to them with a story, the resistance is less. You're not telling people what to think. You're showing them what happened, and you're asking them to draw their own conclusions. And that's an important thing. So much advertising today does not respect the audience. They're yelling at you, they're demanding you do something, they're insisting you do something. Instead of giving you that aha experience, allowing you to discover something for yourself and saying, oh, okay, I'm making that decision. What stories do is they empower the audience. And we like that. We want to feel that we're making our own decision. You can lead them, you can seduce them, you can, again, it's pulling. You're pulling them to you. This is an interesting one because this is a commercial that was created for this community. And I think this is the first time that I have ever played it for anybody in this as part of a seminar. But there are audiences throughout this great land who have heard this commercial and know about Fairfield, Iowa because of this. Let's see if I can just find it. Here we go. Everybody's Whole Foods. And I tell them, I wrote this for a little town, 10,000 people. And I said about 3,000 of the people are somehow associated with the university, and they're pretty good customers of Everybody's Whole Foods. Okay, they nod as if they know. And I say, but there's a 7,000 kind of sitting there, potential audience that they're not bringing in, that they wanted to bring in. And this was, God, quite a while ago that we did this campaign for Everybody's. And I said, so what I did was I talked to the people who shop there. I talked to the people who did not shop there and would never shop there. Thank you very much. And I talked to some people who did shop there, and we will call them standard Midwestern folks who, for some reason or another, went into Everybody's and they found, oh, this is good. In some cases, their doctor said, you need to get off this kind of food or you need to get off genetically modified. Here's where you go. You go to Everybody's and you get this and this and this. So I talked to people and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is going to lead more people to come in who weren't coming in? And my assumption was organic food is more expensive, so it was a dollar issue. I was wrong. And that's the magic of talking to potential customers. And I found out that it was a psychological barrier. People were not coming in because they didn't feel comfortable, okay? I'm not gonna walk into a place where you got big things full of basmati rice or lentils with no directions and something called tofu. Could be anything. And so they weren't coming in. They didn't realize how much like a regular supermarket Everybody's is. You know, they have fast food and they have 100 kinds of ice creams and you know the story, you've been there. And so how do I lead them in? So I put together some composite stories of some of the people who started to shop there and what their experience was like. And let me just play you this because this ties in with that whole empowering the audience thing that I was talking about.
There's a family we know who might be a lot like you. They've been living in Fairfield all their lives. They've always thought about getting organic food, but let's face it, they felt a little strange going into Everybody's because they weren't used to it. I mean, is it like a regular supermarket? You hate to go into a place and not feel comfortable, so they didn't come in. Well, years went by, and as their kids started to grow, they began to think more about getting organic food again, and finally said, maybe we should just try it. They came into Everybody's and found that it really is laid out just like a regular supermarket with a produce section, fast food section, a dairy section, chips, dips, snacks, frozen foods. They also discovered that the people at Everybody's were very helpful, making them feel right at home. Now, your story may not be like the family we know, but a visit to Everybody's might be worth a try. Just a suggestion. We named it Everybody's because it's a store for everybody. Everybody's Whole Foods, North 2nd Street, Fairfield.
The commercial went on the air, and within a day, their traffic increased. It was amazing. And it was we didn't say come in. We didn't say come in this Saturday. We didn't even say would be. We just said it's something you might want to think about it. You might. There's a lot of might. Maybe you're like this. Maybe not. But very gentle, very gentle. And you wouldn't think, in general, that kind of a commercial could get results. But it did, and it worked very well. It was a story that they told me, and I put it together. It was a true story, but it was not a factual story. It wasn't one person. And the other part of that is, and people with kids will especially know this, you will do things for your kids you will not do for yourself. You know this, and I do too, and I use that to my client's advantage because it's a true story. Anyway. It worked. That's another way to tell a story. Stories will allow your prospect, the person you want to buy from you, to experience ownership of your product or service in the present moment. There's an old saying that the fear of loss is greater than the desire for gain, and it seems to be true. If you paint a vivid picture of what it's going to be like to own this, or to visit this place, or to buy this furniture, or to whatever it happens to be, and people get involved, they co-create with you, as I said, they participate in this art form, which is also commerce, and then not buying it can feel like a loss, especially if there's a limited time or a limited number of them available, or a limited time that the sale is going to be on. So that's another way you have them fall in love with it and you take it away. Stories allow you to make a personal connection with your potential buyers when they arrive at your website, or they arrive at your store, or they drive by and happen to see your sign. Whatever it happens to be, people buy from people, as I said. They like people they know and trust are the ones that they want to buy from. So sometimes it's good to tell your story in terms of how you want other people to feel, because other people may have the same situation as you. If you're a sports nut, talk to other sports nut about what it was like for you to be a sports nut, and you know what it's like because you understand them. I will bring up a very personal example here. My wife, Linda, is a body worker. She uses multiple modalities for alternative health. And how did she get into it? She got into it trying to save her own life. She had some real problems, and she sought help. And then she sought more help, and then she learned more. And the more she learned, the more she spread the word and shared that with other people. She is probably, will tell you that she is the antithesis of a marketer. I try to get her to do marketing, and she just says, shut up. But she's actually a wonderful marketer. If you go to her website, she tells her story. Here's how I got into this. You know, I'm Linda Hedquist, I'm a massage therapist, and I use all these other modalities, and I help people. And basically, she helps people by taking them out of pain and then giving them something to do themselves so they don't have to come back and see her. She says, here's my story, and she tells the story of being sick and not being able to find a solution, almost dying, and coming up with one solution, and then another one, and another angle, another angle, another angle. And suddenly, if you've got some kind of chronic problem or even a simple ache and pain, you say, this woman's been through it all. And so there's more trust developed. And because of that, that person comes in expecting not that they're going to come every week and get a symptom fixed. They're coming to expect that they're going to get something changed that'll balance them or balance their immune system that allows their own body to help heal itself more. She tells that story very well, but she's not a marketer. I just want you to know that. Stories are inherently believable. You've heard the expression, seeing is believing. Well, when you tell a good story, you take the claims you're making and you make them concrete. Have you seen those videos on the internet where somebody is skiing down a vertical thing, or they're in one of those gliders going about 100 miles an hour, 2 inches from a rock cliff, or the guy on the bicycle on the 4-inch thing with a 1,000-foot drop? I can't watch a lot of that, okay? Because my heart rate goes up, I'm sweating, my adrenals are suffering, and I'm not there. It's just on, it's just on Facebook. The same thing when you go to a movie, or you watch a television show, or you read a book. There's part of your brain that does not know what's real and what you are telling it, and that's the interesting part. You see those scenes in your mind's eye, and your body changes. It's why horror movies are frightening and why people used to cry when they watched Little House on the Prairie. Now, the interesting thing is that part of our brains, that active part that creates this stuff and changes our bodily chemistry, galvanic skin response and our breath rate and all that, and it changes the chemicals in our synapse, that part of the brain, it's where we make our decisions. How many people here really firmly believe that all your buying decisions are made logically? Can you just show hands? Even if you're buying something like a refrigerator or concrete pavers, it's an emotional decision. Well, stories That's where the emotion is. That's where that's why this thing works. You tell a story that has emotion and people get caught up in it. If people are caught up in an emotional story, and it could be 10 seconds, 60 seconds, it could be a blog, it could be a podcast. We're going to talk about ways to do a number of those things. It could be stuff you do on social media. If it's a good story, you're touching people's emotions, all kinds of emotions. And when you do that, you are creating chemical changes. If you create those chemical changes, it's been posited that that's where memory comes from. That's why we remember stuff. That's why I don't remember my grandmother's stories. Okay, so, except for the ones she told about me. Those were emotional. So the deal is, if you can get people involved and they're co-creating with you and they're getting passionate about the passion that you have about your business, then you're touching them. You're creating something. And when they make their decisions, which are being made emotionally, you're much closer to having them make a decision for you. It's kind of like awakening your brain's inner child, your prospect's inner child. And would you rather sell to the mature, full of cynicism person who's pretending that they are right-brained, or the impulsive, carefree child inside that all of you know it's a left-brain thing, and that's it. That's the way we make our decisions that way. It's one of the reasons that radio works so well, although this kind of stuff can work in any medium, even a point-of-sale purchase, even a direct selling experience where you're just on the phone talking with somebody or in person. Stories also increase the number of times you can touch your market. It's said that you have to make, 7 contacts is the average. Most people give up at 2 or 3, and that's why sales aren't made. But if you can make 7 contacts, good contacts with your prospect, you'll probably sell them. Nobody likes to be sold 7 times. No one likes to sell somebody 7 times. So how do you touch them 7 times? You tell them stories, and you give them information that'll improve their lives. Again, it's that reciprocity thing. You want to make 7 sales calls? I don't. But I would love to tell 7 stories. If you create those stories and release them as a series of emails, release them as a series of podcasts, put them on YouTube. There's so many ways you can tell stories that every one of you, no matter what kind of business or organization you have and you want to touch people, you've got wonderful ways to do it. We have more ways to tell stories than ever before. But we're not learning how to, we got all the digital, but we haven't honed our analog skills. And so that's what we're going to be doing. Success stories, it goes without saying. Testimonials. The people who have bought from you before oftentimes are the people who are most anxious to tell other people the same thing. Word of mouth is very, very powerful. Stories also allow you to charge more. Many of us don't charge enough for our services. We become commoditized. We figure somebody else is charging too little, we will do the same thing. You want to create value. One of the ways to create value is to create trust, to tell people stories, to give them benefits. Stories have the ability to sell things that are more ego-based than need-based. You have 2 things. You want to buy something and you have a want or you have a need. You might need to have some transportation. You might want to have a Rolls Royce. You don't need, nobody needs a Rolls Royce. But some people want it so badly, they simply pay the extra, however many tens of thousands of dollars, to buy essentially what is a BMW with a different shell. Because to them, it's worth it. How do you sell that? You tell stories. And you tell the stories that people will tell themselves. And that's what they reinforce, they self-reinforce the stories, the seeds that you've planted. And that allows you to sell more. That's why some people buy $15,000 Rolex watches when Walmart, I think, sells watches for $26. They work pretty well. And certainly, last but not least, stories will differentiate you from the competition. Every one of us in this room has competitors. And the competitors may not be direct competitors. If we're in who knows? We're in the book selling business. Well, your competition is Netflix. Your competition is television. Your competition is the movies or the state fair, everything. That's your competition. Very few of them are telling stories. You, in telling stories, can jump way ahead of your competitors and do extremely well. Telling stories is kind of like nitroglycerin. You can move mountains or you can blow your hands off. I'm going to attempt to give you some principles so that you can move mountains. And hopefully that'll work. You have a business, organization. There are 3 ways to grow it, and only 3 ways. You get more customers. That's the most expensive way, but that's one of the ones that we do the most. You get more people to buy. Secondly, you get customers to buy more often. Unless you're a funeral home. Then it's probably a one-time deal. But the family will tell other people what a good job you did, so maybe that works as well. And you get customers to spend more each time. So more customers, they buy more often, and they spend more each time they buy. Stories will amplify all those. I have this fun job. I get to work with thousands of businesses and organizations, retail, service, not-for-profit, professional corporations, educational institutions, political entities. And I've used stories to make millions of dollars for my clients because nothing has worked better. So that's what I'm trying to do is take several of these presentations and put it into 4 chunks. And I'm going to want to get your feedback to see how we're doing with that. And the 4 chunks will be today, Wednesday, and then a Tuesday following it. We all expand from where we are. I call it circles of influence, and this is my marketing thought. And this takes marketing and expands it a little bit to what you might be thinking. Marketing is not advertising. Advertising is like one aspect of marketing. So the circles of influence, how can you use stories in your circles of influence? First of all, every business or every organization has a personality, has a feel. There's something that is common that you want to develop. So the first person that you tell a story to is you. You come up with a story and a description of your business. Here's what we do. And it might be, well, I use something called, no, I'll cover that later. Notice how I'm talking to myself. This is one of the first signs. An adult with a sippy cup. I'll cover this in more detail later, but I think it's important to come up with now. What is the emotional problem that you solve? Every business solves an emotional problem, an emotional need. And so, well, let me ask. Somebody raise their hand and just tell me what kind of business they're in, and we'll use you as an example. I'll be gentle. Yes?
Computer service.
Computer service?
Yes.
What kind of computer service? Sales?
Okay. No.
You just service them. Macs? PCs,
Correct. Servers.
K-Pros, just testing, Tandy, okay, just, all right. So you got a computer service. Somebody comes into you with a computer that doesn't work, okay. What's the emotional problem you solve?
They think of something that works.
They want something that works. What's the emotion behind that?
They want their life to work.
Fear.
Okay. So they want it to work, and they're panicking. So there's fear. That's certainly an emotion. They're looking for stability. They're looking for you to solve something that they can't do. So you will either end up being a god, or they'll hate you forever because you couldn't fix it. So every business has some. So you keep peeling the onion, and in this case, it might be fear. It might be insecurity. Fear of loss? What other emotions would be for a computer company?
It's like a sense of helplessness. A sense of helplessness.
Sense of helplessness. Good. When you peel the onion and you get to those basic emotions, now you have the basis to be able to create stories. It's sometimes tough when you're on the surface, but you keep peeling it. Every business has that. What's the emotional problem you solve? Helplessness, fear, all those things. And you say, okay, if I was going to create a commercial, if I was going to write an ad, if I was going to do a blog post, And it was all about, and it was that solving that basic helplessness, that fear. How would I write that? And suddenly it's easier to tell a story from that point of view. And if you do that effectively, people respond. And that's when the magic happens. That's when the magic. So solving that problem is really key. So coming back to you, that's the first person you tell this story to. And once you get it, once you say, okay, that's who we are, that's what we're going to accomplish, and that's how we take care of our customers, that's how we're going to change the world, that's how we're going to change the city or the state, whatever it happens to be, that's your mission, that's your story. The next circle of influence is your staff. These are the people these are the first people your customers talk to on the phone. These first people they see when they walk in your store. These are the people who need to have that same story and know it so well, they can tell it as well as you can. If they have that story, they will pass that on to the people that come in. What's the next group? The next group are your suppliers, people that you deal with, people that supply you with everything from, coffee to toilet paper to services of all kinds, media. They need to know your story because they're in contact with people all the time. And if they know your story, they will pass that on. It's another form of word of mouth. If you're in the food business, I worked with the, I always get this wrong, Iowa State University. And they had me create a video for people who create food. Now, this town is an interesting one. We've got 10,000 people, and we have more food businesses here, I think, per capita than any other place in the world, which is fabulous, from kombucha to chocolate to baked goods, and on and on and on it goes. It's wonderful. But they have to sell to customers, or they have to sell to distributors or to retailers. Each one of them needs to know that story. If they know your story, the story behind your product and what it does for customers, then it's easier for you to sell customers, it's easier for you to sell the retailer, it's easier for you to sell the distributor, who then tells that story to the retailer, who tells that story to the customer. It's in your packaging. Stories, again, it's the same kind of thing. Now, every one of us has stories. And what I would like to do is have everybody pair up. Pick a partner right now. Could be the person next to you. Hopefully that makes it easier. And when you have a partner, if anybody does not have a partner, please raise their hand. Okay. Is everybody paired up? Okay. No lonely people? Okay, good. So, now here comes the tough part. Of the two of you, one has to decide to be A. Who will be A? Okay? Got that? Okay, so everybody has a partner, and we've all chosen who the A is. Okay, B is going to be the interviewer, A is going to be the interviewee. Now what B is going to ask you is, tell me about your business or your organization or your life, whatever it happens to be, so that it could be an origin story. Here's how we got started. It could be an emotional story. It could be your elevator speech. Everybody familiar with that term? You get stuck on an elevator and you're on your way up, and there's a potential contact for you. You have 30 seconds. How do you tell a story? Oh, what do you do? They say. Well, you know how most advertising and marketing really is kind of obnoxious. What I do is I show people how to find stories in their lives so that they can make that work, so that the audience enjoys it, and so they can increase their business. Oh, 14th floor. And that's it. So an elevator speech is like that. You tell a story that tells about who you are. It could be a lesson learned story. How did I get into this? Well, I had health problems, and so I needed to solve them, basically to live. Here's what I did, and now I have that information. I pass it on to other people. It could be a story, the story with which someone who heard it would want to do business with you. That's interesting. Tell me more. Oh, here's my card. Boom. So A will tell that story. It could be a personal story. It could be a story about the customer, whatever it happens to be. And I'll give you like 2 minutes to tell that story. B will be the interviewee. Take notes, because you may be asked to do a capsule of that story in 30 seconds. And you should be able to, if you pay attention, make some notes, and then we'll reverse the roles. Okay, so we have 2 minutes. A will tell the story. B will be the interviewer. Ready? Go. Okay, your time is up. Finish the sentence you're on and hand in your papers. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch roles. B will tell the story, the emotional story, the elevator speech, whatever you want to call it. Could be about their business, could be about their life. A will be the interviewer, and A, your job this time is to take notes, pay attention, and be able to retell that story in a few seconds. All right, so again, a couple of minutes. Begin. Okay. Okay, class? Class? Very good. It's amazing what you can find out in 2 minutes. It always amazes me. Is anybody brave enough to share a 30-second version of the person that you talked to? So this is in your role, yes, as an interviewer. Well, tell me about the person you interviewed.
This young lass here is my wife, Vina, and she wanted to increase her communication as to why homeopathy works. She recalled years ago at a PTA meeting where parents told how kids were on antibiotics that didn't help their children, but she had experience with our own children that homeopathy really did what the antibiotics couldn't do. And so her passion is to share that now with those.
So it's a story of going against conventional wisdom to a large extent.
But it was also a story which is something you didn't have the ability to finish writing in because I was talking so fast. About the fact that I was afraid to explain to those people because I was going to be seen as a freak.
I'm sorry.
I was going to be seen as a freak.
Oh,
For giving them that information and I would like to be braver about that.
Exactly, exactly. There's a lot of angles to that story. Being brave to tell that story is great because people respond to that. It opens up their hearts. And you can take there's lots of versions of that story. The thing is you can't make some of this stuff up. Give me another example.
So I was interviewing Scott. So Scott's a marriage and family therapist. Anyway, so his story was, I was a professor and my students were working at agencies that weren't allowing them to become real therapists. And so they convinced me to start a business, private practice.
So again, you were in a situation, as many of you have been, where you saw a better way. Somebody was not being effective at what they were doing in the traditional way of teaching or advertising or fixing computers or healthcare or whatever it happens to be. And so you came up with new ways, or you took the information you had and you took a whole new approach. A lot of people don't say, well, let's take a look. In Fairfield, Iowa, my MBA needs a taxidermist, that's what I'm going to do. No. You like to hunt, you had fun stuffing animals, that's why you got into taxidermy. And don't tell me you didn't. It's that passion that each one of you has, that if you get that into a story, and I always tell my advertising clients, the people at radio stations and television stations and advertising agencies, they capture that lightning in a bottle. That's the key. You do that, and it's contagious. The audience gets it. Yeah, I want somebody who's that passionate about sports or fitness or whatever it happens to be. That's who I want to deal with. And suddenly that story lifts you up above all the others that say, we're on sale this week. We got a really big sale going on. I don't care. Show me the guy who's got so much passion that he works 18 hours a day doing this and does it on weekends and then devotes his time to the Little League or what. That's who I want to deal with. And stories do that. It breaks through. So that's great. Give me another. Yes. Let me guess who you interviewed. Okay.
My husband, John, his problem is to attract others into service through the retired and senior volunteer program that he coordinates in Jefferson County. And he thinks of his early experience in Thailand teaching ESL, and it brought the people whom he was teaching and himself such profound joy. And he finds the same joy teaching ESL at Indian Hills to international students here. They and I are profoundly joyful, and I want to spread that delight to seniors to find passion in volunteering in one of the 17 agencies that he coordinates with, and to find the perfect link to find the delight through service.
There you go. Passion and joy. I have so much fun doing this. I want to do more of it, and I want to get more people. And the thing is, you can take stories of your students and tell those stories. Changed my life. I was able to do, that's the fun. That's the fun of it. And then people say, yeah, that's like me. If somebody hears a story about your business and they say, wow, they know me. John Collier or Robert Collier got into the conversation you're already having, or wow, that's me they're talking about. They won't say those words, but if it resonates with them that way, it will work effectively. What I want to do as we continue, I would like to hand out what is known as the world's shortest survey. It has one question with a bonus question, and it will help me improve the next 3 as well. So take a look at that and fill that out. So we're using stories to position your business. You've got an origin story, a lesson learned story. What's the other? Oh, the other is solve problem kinds of stories. Here's what I do. And if you're in the computer repair business, you can just say, here, you can just tell stories about somebody walked in tears, their hard drive, it's wrecked, it's ruined all the pictures of my grandchildren or the business that I built for 17 years, it's gone. And I just smiled and said, maybe, maybe not. And I carefully opened up, you know, the hard drive in my hermetically sealed chamber that I open up hard drives in, and I found that we saved 94% of it. And, you know, da-da-da. Every business has these stories. That's how you tell them. It's stories about going beyond, an unusual request, exceptional guarantee. There is, let me play you just one other. Even though we, there is a place, anybody here from the Portland, Oregon area? Oh God, I can just make up anything then. No. There is a landscaping place called Dennis 7Ds. They're 7 brothers, they have 7 stores. How do they figure that out? I don't know. It's called Dennis's 7Ds, and they do landscaping, they sell seeds and trees and anything you put in the ground. They also sell pots and planting materials, greenhouse stuff, you name it, they sell it. Well, the situation is that everything that they were selling, just about everything, was also being sold by discounters, by Home Depot, by Walmart, by True Value, by the guy in the truck on the side of the road. Their business was eroding because they had positioned it kind of as a commodity business. They were a higher profit situation. They charged a little bit more, but they did wonderful work. The people on staff were really smart. And I said, okay, that's good, that's good, that's good, it's not going to do it. And then I went to their website and I said, so tell me about your guarantee. They looked like they had a pretty strong voice. I said, well, you know, if somebody buys something you're not happy with it, we, you know, replace it. I said, like what? Just anything, really. I said, you know, somebody buys a flat of tomato plants and they don't put them in the ground. I said, do you replace them? He said, yeah, really. I said, what if somebody buys a ficus tree and they never water it, ever? Well, we'll just replace it. Really? I said, what if somebody buys one of those $600, you know, ceramic urns and they put it in their, you know, living room and they change their rug 7 months later? What do you do then? Well, we take it back. You take it back. You do all that, yeah. Anybody familiar with Nordstrom's? Nordstrom's is famous. They're on the Northwest. They are famous for their customer service. And the stories about Nordstrom abound. You can look up, you could probably just Google Nordstrom stories. They're totally amazing. Somebody would bring in snow tires to get them replaced. Nordstrom does not sell snow tires. They just they replaced them. Somebody came in, they were in a hurry to get to a meeting, they couldn't get to the meeting, and they had to get a suit or something like that, and then suddenly there was an emergency at home, they packed up the suit, they sent it to the person with an extra tie and a shirt at the hotel they were staying at. This kind of stuff. It's expensive, but you don't, I mean, if you go to Nordy's, they take care of you, period. They will take stuff that you haven't bought there. If they don't have something, they will go to another store, buy it from that store, come back and sell it to you so you don't have to leave. It's amazing. So anyway, this company is like the Nordstroms of landscaping. I said, we have to do something with this. Let's talk about your guarantee. Well, what do you mean? I said, let's publicize it. Well, they're a little reticent to do that. Now, this is in the midst of a real downturn in the economy with all their competitors basically eating their lunch, which is a technical term. So what happened is I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about that guarantee. And they said, well, if you talk about it, then more people are going to come in and ask for their money back. And I said, best thing that ever happened. What? I said, every time somebody comes in, we make up a story. We tell a story. Somebody came in and they ran over, this pine tree with their SUV. We replaced it. We would do the same for anybody. The guy on the side of the road is not going to do that. Walmart's not going to probably do that. So I said, we're going to, and we found different ways. I said, the campaign that we created for them was almost all about the guarantee. Let me just play you one of the commercials.
Hello, Dennis 7Ds.
Yeah, I'm calling to report a fatality.
Oh, you should call 911.
No, it's a plant.
What?
It was a nice, healthy tomato plant when I took it home from Dennis 70s, and then we had that dry spell, and
Oh, and you forgot.
to water it.
And now...
It's dead.
Oh, it's all right.
Yeah, but
Sir, just come in for a new one.
What?
A new one. At Dennis 7Ds, we guarantee all our plants, even if
So
you...
it's true.
You mean our guarantee?
Yeah, you see, my sister bought a pot at Dennis 70s.
Oh, yes, we do have the largest selection of pots in the area.
Yeah, well, this one didn't quite match her carpet, so
she brought it back.
Yeah, and you exchanged it for another. No hassles, no questions.
No problem. Everything at Dennis 7Ds is guaranteed. Plants, pots, herbs.
Yeah, well, why doesn't everybody come to Dennis 70s?
Well, some people may not know about our no-hassle guarantee.
Oh, well, I'm going to make it my mission in life to tell the world all about...
Sir?
Huh?
Why don't you just come in for your replacement tomato plant?
Okay.
Don't let your yard be a menace. See Dennis. Dennis 7Ds in Lake Oswego, Southeast Powell, Cedar Hills, Seaside, and Gearhart.
They started their business in 1956. They were in very bad shape, thinking about closing some stores. 3 months later, they had the best sales they had had since 1956. And all we did is talk about the guarantee. That was the advantage that they had that they were not using. And so every business has some advantages. And because they're too close to the landscaping, they can't see it. But I, from the outside, can, and showed them how to tell a story with it. And it worked. And it worked very well. And so it was...
More people bringing things in that were not supposed to be returned?
No. Same percentage, which is, I think it's like 3% or something. I mean, smaller than that maybe. Yeah, not more people at all. So that's a good question. And so their fear was that that was going to happen, and lo and behold, it did not, etc. And it's always fun to do that. The stories are sitting there waiting for them. The stories, your staff will have stories. Your suppliers will have stories. Your affiliates will have stories. If you're a realtor, you have affiliates with probably people who paint and remodel and do gutters and landscaping and all that stuff. Those are the people who have stories. Your prospects, and certainly you. What we're going to do next Wednesday is we're going to show you how to, you'll never, ever, ever run out of stories. I'll show you how to find 1 million stories in your own life. And then we're going to show you ways to hone those stories to really make them effective. And then as we continue this process, we're going to go into how to use it in every kind of medium you can possibly think of. But before we close out today, let's have a sing-along. No, I don't know why I said that. Are there any questions that I haven't answered?
I found online through Twitter and then YouTube a story that was created in 4 chapters. It's called The Day His Heart Stopped. I don't know if anyone's seen it. It's made by some millennial marketing company, but it's Walgreens. And they're not selling anything, but they're telling the story how the husband was in great shape, or she falls in love, gets married, and then eventually something happens to this young man and he has a heart attack, his heart stops. Anyway, I think there's 4 chapters. Chapter 3, they start talking about transcendental meditation, how it helped them. I mean, it just surprised the heck out of me. And then, of course, it ends, and then they have the Walgreens logo. What a brilliant way to let you know that you can get products from them, but they're not overtly selling anything.
Ken, you're right. That is the power of story. If somebody says, well, is there a general rule? What you want to do, and I'll probably say this again from time to time, if you're not somehow collecting all the information, all information on each one of the people who contacts you, whether they call, whether they stop in, whether they're just browsing, whether they walk through, whether they buy something, whether they buy something and bring it back, you should be collecting the information and just their name and email address. Give them a benefit for doing that. Maybe you have a monthly drawing, and they enter their name in a drawing. People would like a benefit for giving up their email. And maybe the benefit is, whatever your business is, you're going to give them something. You're going to give them a how-to, tips on painting, or whatever kind of business you have, at no charge to them. Let's say it's email. Your first email, it's a how-to, it's a tip. Second email, same thing. Third email, same thing, and at the very end, an offer. Next one is an email, no offer. Next one is another email, no offer. Third one, maybe something at the end. So they tend to expect your emails as information, as ways to change their lives, as way to improve them, as stories. And every once in a while, they know they're going to get an offer. They will tend to open, if everyone is an offer, they're just going to stop opening your emails. So that's one thing you can do. And then you can do it with blogs, you can offer them videos, you can put stuff on your website. And I'll throw in one other thing. No one is going to check out your website. Don't ever say, check out our website. In 1992, we checked out websites. We don't anymore. Go to our website for a 10% discount. Go to our website for a free video on how to do this. Go to our website to find out 6 ways to ask your plumber what their experience is. You know, go to our website for, make sure it's a benefit. And then when they opt in, you've given them a gift. Again, when they opt in, you now have information from them. It's precious information. Don't share it with anybody. Just use it for yourself and send them stuff. Improve their lives. You will gradually become customers. You will gradually increase your top-of-mind awareness. And again, tell stories in doing all this. So, does everyone have one of those sheets that says the world's shortest survey? And if you could just jot down some information on that, share it with me. I will be able to improve the next series of these. And as I say, next Wednesday we're going to do it again, and the Wednesday after, and then the Tuesday following that last one. So, once again, thank you, David, for inviting me to do this. I thank all of you for coming.